this is probably one of the more interesting season preview that I'm going to be doing out of all 26 season previews I'm going to be doing for each MLS team. And that, of course, is talking about the Chicago Fire and their upcoming season. And, the Chicago Fire, they're kind of like an expansion team this year. New identity, new logo, moving back to Soldier Field, and certainly a team that is changing their culture and beginning a new era heading into this new decade. And, with all that, it just kind of feel like it's kind of an expansion team kind of vibe, even though they've been in this league for over 23 years now. Now, the Chicago Fire last season, they finished with a record of 10, 12, and 12. They had a ton of draws last season. And because they kind of finished in a record that looks like a very mediocre mark, well, it is. They were very mediocre and was at times very inconsistent too. And therefore, you can definitely see that in the record standpoint where it's almost very similar, where they can have a game where they can win a game, then the very next one they can lose it, and then the very next one they can draw that match, and then the pattern just keep repeating. There was just no consistency whatsoever for this Fire team. They had 42 points last season. They scored 55 goals, but allowed 47 last season, and they actually had a +8 goal differential, which you would think with a positive goal differential, and especially with a +8 goal differential, this team would actually make the playoffs. But they didn't. They finished 8th in the Eastern Conference, just missed out on a playoff spot, and they got knocked out in the 4th round of the U.S. Open Cup by St. Louis FC. And no, it's not the St. Louis team that is about to come to MLS. It's the St. Louis team that is playing in the USL right now. Now, players that the Chicago Fire has brought in, so despite the fact that they are changing their identity and culture, and their new owner promised that they are going to make some big signing heading into this offseason. Yeah, about that. So far, they only bought Alvaro Madron, Robert Barrick, Connor Sparrow, Miguel Navarro, and Bobby Shuttleworth are their only signings that they have done this offseason. Now, we still have 3 weeks left before the beginning of the season at the time of this recording, so they could definitely bring in some more names heading into the remaining part of this offseason. But right now, the fact that they have, brought in 5 players, and probably the most notable is Robert Barrick, who they just signed him on a DP contract a couple of weeks ago, and he's supposed to be the guy to replace Nemanja Nikolic up front. That's it. That's really kind of the signings that they have done. Now, they are also rumored with a guy from Rapid Vienna, and if I remember who his name is, let me just kind of search it up very quickly. By the way, it's now almost around 11 o'clock, so my mind is kind of a little bit disoriented right now. I mean, I already did like 2 videos prior to this day, so I tends to not remember some stuff. Oh, yeah, it's that Dejan L guy that I could not pronounce his last name that they've been rumored to trying to get, and whether or not if they're going to get him, we shall see. But yeah, they have not signed a lot of players, and it's not that the Chicago Fire hasn't really been linking with somebody. They have linked with a couple of big name players, with the likes of Chicharito once linked with this team, and even Rodolfo Pizarro, who is now heavily linked with Inter Miami. If you guys remember, the Chicago Fire was the first team that actually was linked with Pizarro, but it seemed like the fact that they saw the price tag that Rayados is asking Chicago to pay in order to get Rodolfo Pizarro, and they thought that it was too much. That's why they no longer think about getting him, and that's also the reason why they haven't really made a lot of progress in terms of getting these new players. And that has really hurt this team heading into this season, not only with my optimism of this team started to kind of run a little bit low, of the fact that just because they got a new identity, does that mean that they actually are going to make the playoffs with these lack of signing? But it's also, the fans are kind of restless right now, Obviously, the fans are still complaining about the new logo that they that their team has, and that I have heard there's rumor that they're going to probably switch to another logo heading into next season. But obviously, there's a lot of unhappy fans that don't like the new logo, and I also have heard that the first game at Soldier Field is not only not even going to come close to being a sellout, but it's actually going to be less than right now. As of now, they only sold like less than 10,000 seats in their opening games, which, we still have a month before their season opener, so I don't think there should be panic yet. The fact that they only sold less than 10,000 seats, their ticket sale could potentially picked up, but it's not looking good for this team that was promising to be going into a new era and going to a better direction than what they have suffer in the last decade. Now, going back to the outs player, and there is a lot of players that left this Chicago Fire team, and they basically kind of just completely got rid of most of the player that was part of the old regime and part of the Fire team that before they rebranded and moved back to Soldier Field. So you got Bastian Schweinsteiger, who of course retired from the Chicago Fire. They were hoping that Bastian Schweinsteiger could potentially bring them success when they first bought him. He did get them to a playoff appearance, but that's about it. And this is another example of just because you sign a aging old European star to anchor your team and you think that he could potentially guide you to a deep playoff run, no. Bastian Schweinsteiger, although he made a big impact in his first year, yeah, after that, he looked like he was completely washed up, and that, last season, it felt like he was really not only on his last leg, but he was actually one step out of the Chicago Fire door in terms of heading to retirement. Nemanja Nikolic is another guy that's going to be out. Dax McCarty, who's now with, I believe he is now with Nashville. I believe either, if I remember, did they actually pick him up on the expansion draft, or did they actually get him on a trade? I think they probably got him on a trade, but he's now no longer with the Chicago Fire. That goes the same with Grant Lillard, Diego Campos, Stefan Cleveland, who's now with the Seattle Sounder. Nico Gaitan went back to Lee, and I believe right now he's with Olympiacos Lyon. Alexander Katai, who is now with the Galaxy after the Galaxy signed him earlier this offseason. Christian Martinez, Armando Moreno, David Osted, Richard Sanchez, and Marcelo are the players that is out of this team. So a lot of starting 11 players from last season is out of this team. And as I said, when you look at some of the replacement for those players that they lost this offseason, yeah, that's not looking good, with the fact that they barely have signed anybody to try to replace some of their key attacking core that they had from last season. Now, in terms of the main goal scorer for this team, I think it has to be Robert Barrick. I mean, he's basically the number 9 of this team. It could still be CJ Sapong. I mean, I thought Sapong last season had a decent year, and he definitely had kind of a little bit of a redemption year after he kind of got off to, he had a poor season in 2018, but I'm going to say it has to be Robert Barrick because they pay a ton of money to get him, and he's basically your DP player, and they really hope that he's going to be the guy that can replace the productivity that Nemanja Nikolic did with this team. Playmaker, I'm going to say Przemysław Frankowski, and I put a question mark because I honestly don't know who's going to be the playmaker with this team. Like, last season, I would think it would either be Katai or Nico Gaitan, but since both of them are no longer with this team, and Frankowski is pretty much the guy that is next on the list in terms of the most assists of this team last season. That's why I decided to put him on the playmaker role. But again, do I think he's going to be an effective playmaker? I mean, he could still maybe spring in a couple of assists, and he still could be a decent kind of playmaker of a player. But is he your answer in terms of being the number 10? Probably not. So that's why I just put a question mark on there, and that's why they absolutely need to think about maybe signing a number 10 this offseason. MVP, I put 3 question mark because I honestly cannot come up with who is going to be the MVP of this team. I mean, I would say if I had to put an MVP this season, I'm also gonna go with Robert Varick because again he's your DP, and you know you usually want your DP to be an MVP kind of player and be the best player on your team. But I don't know. I don't know if he's going to score 10 to 15 goals and reproduce what Nemanja Nikolic did with this team. So I'm just going to put a huge question mark in terms of who exactly is going to be the MVP. And there are going to be some teams that I'm going to actually do this where I'm actually just going to put a question mark and not even going to write down names of who I think the MVP is because I really don't know. And most of those are probably teams that are not very good and probably don't have a very strong start 11. Now, the surprise package, I'm going to go with Georgi Mihailovic. I mean, I know last season Mihailovic kind of struggled a little bit and he was nowhere near as good as he was in 2018. But I have a feeling he still could be a decent player. I mean, this is a guy that when he comes up to the scene, he was a very highly rated homegrown player for the Chicago Fire. And I still rate him pretty high and that he could still do very good things with this Fire team, and maybe he could be the guy that might be the number 10 and the playmaker player that the Chicago Fire needs. But if you're going to rely on a young guy like Georgi Mihailovic to be your main playmaker, then yeah, I don't know if you're going to do very well, even though I think he could have a good bounce back season and that he could rediscover his good form that he had back in 2018. Now, what I like about this team, well, again, this team feels like an expansion team and that, you know, I like the fact that they are heading into a new era and that they admit what they did in the last decade was just absolutely horrendous and that they want to turn the page and go back to kind of the glory days of what this franchise was. I mean, a lot of people forget that just because they had a horrendous decade in the previous decade, you got to remember, this used to be one of the most successful and one of the most dedicated MLS team. I mean, back in the 2000s and even in the late 90s when this team come into the league, this was a juggernaut of a team. And right now, I'm guessing they want to try to rediscover that form by moving back to the stadium where it made them kind of like a juggernaut in the 2000s. And they also want to change the culture that clearly they just not only lost during the previous decade, but they don't even really have a culture in the previous decade, and they didn't really have an identity of what this team was going to become. Now, the big question about this upcoming season, again, where's the reinforcement? I mean, if this is going to be the reinforcement heading into this upcoming season, I am very concerned with the Chicago Fire, and that I feel like this year could even be worse than last season because, again, they stripped down so many of their attacking core, and I'm guessing the reason originally when I saw that they stripped down a lot of their attacking core and pretty much their main core player that they have got for the past couple of seasons, this was all part of a new era where they're trying to bring in some new guys and reestablish a new culture in the team. But the fact that they haven't really done that and have got rid of all these players without putting some reinforcement in, yeah, that does make me very concerned about this upcoming season, and that don't be surprised, they could be one of the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and especially the Eastern Conference this season has some very decent teams that is going to be fighting for those 7 spots in the playoffs. And also, does the new identity mean playoff success? Well, right now it doesn't feel like it because not only the fans are complaining about the logo, some even complain about the kit that they released, which, by the way, that kit that the Chicago Fire has is the only kit that doesn't have that free stripe right near the shoulder, which that kind of feels weird that they're the only team that doesn't have that. Not quite sure why exactly it is the case, but some people complain that the kit that they had looks just as ugly as the logos that they had, and also fans are getting restless. The fact that this new ownership looks like the previous ownership that is unwilling to spend, and they're bringing guys that doesn't really excite the fan base and think that they could be a playoff team. But like I said, they still have 3 weeks to fix that, and that in these 3 weeks we'll see whether or not if they're going to be bringing some more reinforcement. And I also want to even add how will Raphael Wiki, the new manager for the Chicago Fire, would do with this team. I mean, right now I know he's going to have a lot to do in terms of trying to make this team a competitive one, but it also helped the fact that he gets some reinforcement and at least he get a team that he can maybe work to try to get this team back to the playoffs. So yeah, we shall see how the Chicago Fire is going to be heading into this season, and are they actually going to bring in some more signing in the last 3 weeks? But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. If you're a Chicago Fire fan, what do you think of the acquisition that you made in this offseason? Obviously, I know a lot of people are not happy with the way that they barely had made any signings this offseason, and they lost so many of their key attacking core player from last season. But let me know in the comments what do you think of it, and also what do you think what is one thing that you like about this team, and what is the obvious big question about this team heading into this upcoming season. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.